All right, today we are diving into one of the greatest treasure hunts in history. It's a story about a 16-year obsession to find a single shipwreck and the $500 million treasure that simply refused to stay lost.
So, why all the fuss? Well, it really comes down to this number. Over $500 million. That's the estimated value of the treasure we're talking about here.
And just imagine, for more than 300 years, this entire fortune was just gone, scattered across the ocean floor, totally hidden from the world, just waiting for someone stubborn enough to find it.
So how did this legendary treasure end up there in the first place? Well, our story kicks off way back in 1622 when a Spanish galleon sailed straight into the path of a monster hurricane. Now here's the crazy part. The ship, the Atocha, it initially sank on a shallow reef. They actually knew where it was. But then, in this unbelievable stroke of bad luck, a second hurricane barrels through just a few weeks later. It just rips the wreckage to pieces, scattering it everywhere. And just like that, a known location becomes a complete mystery for the next 350 years. And we're not just talking about some old sailor's tale. No. The ship's official manifest, its cargo list, was insane. We're talking 150 gold bars, 1,000 silver bars, chests overflowing with coins, and on top of all that, there were these whispers, these rumors, of a secret, smuggled cargo of priceless emeralds. A prize like that, it's going to attract some attention, right? All sorts of dreamers and adventurers. But there was one man, Mel Fisher, who made finding the Atocha his life's obsession. This was the guy who would tell his crew every single morning, without fail, "Today's the day." You see, Mel wasn't just some dreamer. He was a really experienced diver, had his own successful diving school out in California. But this story, the Atocha, it just got under his skin. It was so powerful that he packed up his entire family, moved them all the way across the country to the Florida Keys because he was just that convinced. He believed he was the one person who could solve this 350-year-old mystery. So, they get to Florida, and they start looking in the Metacumby Keys. That's what all the historical documents seem to point to. But after a full year, after searching 100,000 miles of ocean, you know what they found? Absolutely nothing. Zero. Not a coin, not a plank of wood. It was a total dead end. So, they're at a standstill. They clearly need a game changer, a major breakthrough, and they end up getting two of them, one from a dusty old archive, and the other, well, the other came right out of Mel's own workshop. The first key came from a historian named Eugene Lyon. This guy travels all the way to Seville, Spain, digging through archives. And in all those records, he finds one single, kind of forgotten document, and it mentions a search for the Atocha in the Marquesas Keys. That's over 100 miles from where Mel's team had been wasting all their time and money. Can you imagine? They had been in completely the wrong place. Okay, so they pack everything up and move to the new spot. But of course, it's not that easy. The Marquesas Keys had a whole new problem. The water there was way deeper, and the bottom was covered in thick sand and mud. Visibility was basically zero. I mean, divers couldn't even see their own hands in front of their faces. And this is where Mel's creative kind of backyard inventor genius really came into play. He comes up with this device they nicknamed the mailbox. It's brilliant in its simplicity, really. He takes these two huge tubes, angles them down from the boat's propellers, and basically redirects all that power straight down. It was like a giant underwater leaf blower, blasting away the sand and carving out a big, clear crater on the ocean floor for the divers to search. Okay, so now they have the right location and a new tool to see the bottom. The hunt is back on. But this next phase? This would turn into a grueling 16-year marathon of sacrifice. And then, in 1971, it happens. They get their first real hit, a massive anchor that they could prove came from the wreck. And soon after that, other things start popping up. Cups, swords, cannonballs. It was like they'd found a trail of breadcrumbs on the ocean floor. For the first time, they knew they were on the right path. But following that trail was an absolute battle. Just look at the challenges they were up against. Money was constantly running out, they were tangled up in a massive legal fight, and then they suffered a personal tragedy that almost ended the whole thing for good. So first up, the most practical problem, the money. An operation like this, with boats and crews running 24/7, is just incredibly expensive. And with only these small finds trickling in, the search basically bankrupted Mel Fisher over and over again. And then, get this, the moment they find their first really valuable stuff, a bunch of silver bars, the state of Florida swoops in and says, "Thanks, that's ours now." This kicks off an exhausting 8-year legal war that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. It took 8 years before Mel was finally granted 100% of the rights to whatever he found.
But then, just one day after a huge morale-boosting find, the ultimate tragedy struck. One of their boats capsized in the middle of the night. 3 crew members were killed, including Mel's own son, Dirk. It was an absolutely devastating loss, one that, for most people, would have been the end of the search right there.
But despite the financial ruin, the legal nightmare, and this just crushing personal loss, Mel Fisher and his team, they refused to give up. So now years have gone by. That original trail of artifacts they were following, it went cold. They were now following a new, much fainter line of debris that kind of branched off from the old one. They were just hoping, against all odds, that this was the one. This was the trail that would finally lead them to the main pile, what they called the mother lode. And then, on July 20th, 1985, in an almost unbelievable twist of fate, it was the 10-year anniversary to the day of his son's death. Their sonar scanner picks up a large, faint object on the seafloor. So they send divers down to check out the sonar target, and one of the divers swims just a little bit away from the main target, and there it was. Just there. Not buried, not scattered anymore. An 80-foot-long section of the main wreck, with literal piles of silver bars just sitting right there on top. After 16 long years, they had found the mother lode. And remember those rumors about the emeralds, the secret smuggled cargo? Well, the legend was absolutely true. Hidden inside that wreckage, they found over 2,000 of the world's finest uncut Colombian emeralds. It just proved that all those old sailors' tales were real. You know, when you look back at a story like this, it really makes you wonder, what's the more incredible part? The treasure itself, or the sheer, unbelievable human obsession it took to find it? It's really just a staggering story, a testament to 16 years of defiant and, in the end, triumphant hope.